somebody on the phone. They have hours where you can call them. I think it's like 9 to 11 every single day. But in general, everything's paid for by AES. Everything that I've seen says paid for by AES.
How many of you got the letter that looked like city logos, with city logos?
Yeah. That's not the city logo. It's close. And I don't quite know why they're just trying to imitate it. I'm not a trademark lawyer, but they are trying to imitate it and not doing a very good job. Yes, Jim.
So, same Proposition B fails. You guys vote again. What do you think AES will do next?
Well, he said, what happens if Proposition B fails? What will AES do next? That's a great question. They may or may not resubmit their application to the California Energy Commission. They had an application in to build a power plant on 12 acres, right? And then they said they wanted to work with us, and then they disappeared. But for a year, they were working this process with the California Energy Commission. They were also working a separate process in parallel with the PUC to try to get a long-term contract. And so what they were really doing was crafting the zoning behind closed doors, still working with the Energy Commission. In fact, the city was still spending a lot of money on that Energy Commission application. And so when they brought out Measure B, they really pissed off the Energy Commission. I mean, how would you feel if you were staff people up in Sacramento working on this application for a power plant? AES is running all over the place saying, we need this power plant, we need this power plant. And then they just out of the blue come up with this initiative. Oh, by the way, we're not going to build a power plant. And they've been working on this for like a year. The energy lady at the Energy Commission, I told her, I'm the one who told her. I said, well, what did you think about the initiative that they just rolled out? She goes, what initiative? Well, they didn't call you? No, what are you talking about? Well, they just did a thing. So, you know, they were none too happy. So, but what's going to happen, they'll probably, I'm guessing they'll resubmit their application, but the problem is they're not going to get a long-term contract. And it'll kind of be pointless. What they should do is then come back to the city and say, okay, let's work on the 50 acres and give it to the community and do a proper planning process.
So two of the things you might have heard them, you know, they've said that they'll build industrial, and when you pin them down on what they mean by that, they mean either a desalination plant or a battery storage plant here. Well, for the same reason that that SCE, Southern California Edison, didn't award them a contract here, they're too far from where the power is needed in the future. With the outage of San Onofre, they need the power down south. It would take 5 megawatts from Redondo to match 1 megawatt produced at Huntington or Alamitos. And that's why they got a contract for a battery storage plant at Alamitos in addition to their power plant. Also, either of those uses is very power intensive. So you've got to charge those things up. You'd have to keep the high power lines coming all the way down 190th if you have either of those uses. So they have to pay to maintain infrastructure that otherwise wouldn't be there. So that's another cost that would drive up the ratepayer costs on either the water in the case of a desal plant or the power if you use battery storage. The PUC is not going to approve a battery storage plant here that drives up rates. They could get sued if they do that. And that's why we're not getting a power plant here. So for the same reason we're not going to get a power plant, we're not going to get battery storage here. And similarly, the water district isn't going to want to produce water at even higher. Desal costs a fortune to make. And having the added expense of paying for all that transmission line just for that use is going to drive up the water rates even higher. They have a test plant at Energy El Segundo where they just finished building a brand new power plant. So the city could easily deflect a desal plant to there. But let's suspend belief right now and being realistic. Let's suspend all that and say they get that. Well, if you look at the 50 million gallon per day plant being built down, desal plant being built in Carlsbad today, it only covers 6 acres and it's only 35 feet high. It employs 18 workers. So I guarantee you from a resident perspective, the impact of having desal down there would be much less than having 600 condos plus a hotel plus the commercial plus the Center Cal development. So even if the worst, if you suspend logic and everything else, you think, ooh, they're going to build a desal plant down here, it's not that bad. I'd prefer that to what's going on in Measure B any day of the week. Now there's environmental impacts. I don't want to get into an argument with anyone on that. It kills marine life, larvae and stuff like that as you're sucking in. So there's all sorts of bad stuff about desal. I don't want to get into that debate, but if you suspend all your belief systems and logic, the worst we're going to get is 6 acres, 18 workers, and a 35-foot high building. Okay, yes, sir.
I have a question and a comment. My question is AES on a conditional use permit?
Okay, the question is AES on a conditional use permit? Right now, public utility under the current zoning is listed as conditional use, but because it's a state-controlled utility, the state could override the city. Now, as you get into the other uses, the battery plant and the desal plant, the city would have more power.
Okay. And my comment is, and this is a question really, if Prop B passes, you anticipate some legal action or something of the
So the question is, if Prop B passes, do we anticipate as residents some legal action to overturn it? I don't think that we will have legal grounds based on the way the zoning's written right now. We could, there's a section 13, if you read the city attorney's impartial analysis, you'll see that section 13, he says, is probably illegal. It's generally illegal to put a private entity having veto power over a government function like the city council. So you could sue on that, but then they've got clauses in there that say that all you can take out is that one clause and the rest still stands. So the other alternative, there's a number of alternatives. The city could put out, could actually, if we vote in the right people, like Candace Nafisi, who's in the back there, the city council could vote to put new zoning over top of that and put it to a vote of the people and override everything AES just did. Or the residents could get together and put together an initiative, and we've got some zoning we're working on, but that's a long and arduous process.
So there are courses of action.
There are courses of action, and then there's a way to slow it down as you go through the environmental report. You can sue them on the environmental report. We could drag it out for years, but that is a long and arduous. It's much easier to turn down B right now.
That's right. Why do we do
Yeah,
that?
why force all that on ourselves?
I have a suggestion. It would seem to me it would be logical for the city to spend $25,000 or $50,000 for extra city planner to coordinate developments on both sides of the party.
I'll let Bill talk to that. That's what we've been advocating for over a year now.
Well, it's going to cost more than $25,000 or $30,000, but they're doing it right now in Carlsbad. Okay, Carlsbad has a 100-acre parcel, and they were fighting for years not to have a new power plant. But as Jim said, when San Onofre went down, that's where they needed the power, and so now the NRG is going to build a small power plant. But they've started a huge land use planning process, which is what we should be doing here, and what's done in other areas when you have this kind of land come up for redevelopment that involves bringing in the community, a facilitator, land use consultants, staff, developers to come to a consensus on not only what you want here but what can get here and what is good for the city. See, this Measure B isn't even good for the city. Right? You're only going to get $1.6 million in net.
If you believe AES.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just believing AES. I'll just believe them, right? From their fiscal analysis, $1.6 million net to the city a year. Now they're saying that it's going to be, I think they're saying $6 million in new money to the city. Well, they didn't subtract out the costs, right? But in their fiscal analysis, they do. And that's ridiculous for 50 acres on your waterfront. It's like a rounding error. I mean, a hotel, just a 250-room hotel, just in transit occupancy tax or bed tax, right, which Redondo Beach gets 12%, would bring in well over $2 million a year, just the hotel. But the cost of the residential drags down the money that the commercial could earn. But see, AES wants all this residential because it makes their land more valuable as they sell it and exit. Down in Carlsbad and in other areas along the coast, Chula Vista, they took 2 plants down in San Francisco. They're going to take down Morro Bay. They're coming up with a mix of open space and commercial. So in Carlsbad, they're looking at 50-50. They're thinking 50% open space and 50% commercial. Why commercial? Because that's what brings money to the city. right? And if you have a beautiful open space down there, that's going to make the commercial successful. And so the community is going to benefit from a beautiful park by the water, and the city is going to benefit by more money coming into the city. To plump a bunch of residential down there is a lose-lose. You get more traffic, you don't get the payback to the city, and so I've now forgotten what your question was.
One other option, which
Let me take another question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. We really got to get some other. Yes.
Yeah, have they proven that they can mitigate the soil before they even talk about rezoning? It seems to me that there's a soil contamination issue that I don't see them being able to take enough soil out without getting down to the water.
This isn't the first power plant to be decommissioned and remediated. And if they get Measure B, they will have no problem remediating that site for their big development plan. And this is what's happened all up and down the coast. Like I said, they had 2 power plants taken down in San Francisco. They're already remediating Chula Vista. They thought that was going to cost $100 million. But because there was so much reusable equipment and scrap steel, it only came in at $15 million. AES has already said they think they're going to break even on the remediation of this site. So it's not really a point of concern.
The other issue is infrastructure for the rest of Redondo is going to need to be enhanced to support that infrastructure.
Yeah, why don't you?
You're exactly right. The biggest one is the traffic that we've been talking about. The roads in that area just aren't made to have 10,000 car trips per day down Redondo and Harbor Drive area. So that's the biggest infrastructure impact. And what's amazing is Bill talked about their fiscal analysis and coming out 1.6 million per year. To derive the cost side of that, they used this year's budget. And if you read this year's budget, we're 66 staff short from pre-recession time. They've stretched out road maintenance. Normally you try to get your road maintenance across the city, resurfacing and that kind of stuff, every 10 years. The city had to stretch it to 15 years because they don't have the budget to do it on the normal cycle. And you've heard them say on CenterCal, they don't have enough money to refurbish and maintain the parking structure down at the pier. So AES, their consultant, took this budget that doesn't make ends meet, that's where the city's degrading slowly, and they used that as their basis for cost. So it's a very flawed study from the very start, and they didn't include any cost on the school side in their analysis, which the school budget is about on par with the city budget. So that 1.6 million evaporates very quickly. Now, as to other infrastructure, I'm not sure the status of the sewers and the water delivery down in that area, but if you follow the Legato development, just that development, which is minuscule compared to this, they had to increase the throughput of the sewer in that area because the sewer was too small to take all that new effluent coming out. I won't get too crude on that, but you can imagine what I was going to say. And we don't have that environmental analysis, which is, as Bill was saying earlier, that's why AES chose this method, because it lets them put the cart before the horse. We don't get to see all those environmental impacts before we say whether we like this thing or not. And that's a travesty. Yes, sir.
Could we say a gross generalization of Measure B not passing? The benefit would be that it brings AES back to the table.
That's what, personally, I think that's what's going to happen. Look, AES, it would cost them a lot of money to try to get desal or battery. They'd likely fail. They're going to want to do something with that property as soon as they can. As soon as 2018 rolls around and their contract cuts out, it's a net loss for them. It's a net loss. They have to pay property taxes on it. They have to either maintain the system so they don't leak and pollute more, or they have to decommission them, which is a cost. And it's cheaper to do all that stuff at once while you're tearing down the plant than to do it constantly year by year. So, look, as a big company, I'm on a board of directors of a much smaller company. If we had a net negative cash flow like that, of 50 acres of waterfront property, you think we're going to sit on it and just pay out on it while you've got people getting mad at it? That's the dumbest thing to do. My prediction, personally, is they're going to come to the table. They're going to come in with their tail between their legs and say, sorry, let's work together to get good zoning. And that's why we need to vote this thing down, to give residents a real voice. They'll say, if you read some of Eric Pendergraft, he's the AES lead on this, he says, oh, people like Jim Light or Bill Brand, they don't compromise. There is no compromise in this. We didn't even get one public meeting where folks like you got to say anything about their zoning. They came out and said it's our way or the highway, and if you don't vote for this, we're going to build something nasty just to spite you. And it's just bad. And as you've heard, they've spent over $850,000 flooding us with mailers that are inaccurate and misleading.
I think this gentleman here.
Yeah, questions for you as well. At the beginning of the evening, the gentleman in the front row asked a question about the schools, and you said there was about a net 150 new students based on that development that were down at the school.
No, that uses as an example.
Okay.
It's hard to say.
Okay, but what I learned from that was that those incremental students to the schools would get paid from the state. And what you had said just before the gentleman in the front row asked that first question of the night, that AES was going to offer $4 million net to the schools, a one-time payment.
Correct.
I'm here on a fact-finding mission. That
Sure.
just caught my eye.
So there's a different...
Let me finish.
Sure.
The gentleman's question in the front row about the school funding. So if B were to pass, then AES would provide $4 million to the schools, which otherwise wouldn't go to the schools because the incremental children from that development would be paid for by the state. So that's kind of where I'm going right now.
Sure.
I wanted to know why, you said $6 million a minute ago, like $1.4 million net to the city.
1.6 million.
6 million. So is the other $4 million the school money?
No, the $4 million is actually based on developer fees.
So the
For one time.
the $4 million that you mentioned
Right.
that goes to the school, just before the Q&A opened up, the
Sure.
gentleman in the front row asked about the net student addition and where those monies come from.
Right.
Where's that $4 million go, and would we get it otherwise?
Okay, so good question. The $4 million that AES actually quotes in the study, or HRNA, the associates that did the study, is one-time developer fees. That's an estimate. It's based on square footage of the actual
But it goes to the schools,
It does go to the schools, that's correct.
and it wouldn't otherwise.
That's correct. However, the biggest
The
expense...
incremental students.
The biggest expense on an annual basis, the biggest expense is operating expenses. $70 million operating budget by the school district.
Which the 150 extra students would get 150 extra allocation from the state.
Yes, but there's also extra teachers, remember. There's also extra school
Just
employees.
factors in the allocation.
There's classrooms. Those $4 million will probably go, if they can find a place to put them, to classrooms. So that $4 million will be used very quickly if they even get to that point. As I mentioned, I don't know if you...
Donate $4 million to the school.
Excuse me. As I mentioned earlier, we're looking at about 25 to 26 in K through 2 student to teacher ratio, about 30 to 35 in 3rd through 5th grade, and it's even bigger. In the high school, there are some classes that have up to 40 students per teacher.
Yeah, I know $4 million is a small number.
Right. What's that? I'm sorry?
Small number, I understand.
It's very difficult on the schools to have that many more kids. There's no place to put a new school. There's no money to put a new school. It's great that they're bringing in $4 million. It's one time, and it's likely to go to construction of classrooms if it goes to anything. That's not going to be used for other things. And they're also limited on what they can spend those developer fees on by law. So the biggest expenses on an annual basis are operating expenses for a school district. So where are you going to find the money to pay for teachers and everything else, et cetera? So I just want to make sure that we're getting...
I just want to make sure, commenting on this, it's my understanding that the state funds for school, for each child doesn't cover the full expenses allocated that are needed for that child. And that's why we have things like levies and we have bonds and that we have
And the
to
turkey
pay.
trot.
Well, and remember that levies and bonds are for things like property, for general obligation bonds, construction bonds, et cetera.
But still-
They're not used for operating expenses.
But
Real quickly, if yes or no on B happens, will
Right.
the power lines be gone?
That's a different question.
But let me touch on your previous question just for a second. Whatever happens down there, whether it's Measure B or some other development plan, there's going to be developer fees for the school. So you don't need to sign up for this huge upzoning that's going to generate all these huge impacts because you want to see money go to the school. It's the same thing with...
Parks don't have developer fees.
Sorry?
Parks don't have.
Oh, sure they do. And the other thing is jobs. You see all the union coming out with, oh, we're supporting Measure B because we need jobs, jobs, jobs. There's going to be jobs no matter what happens down there. And we really shouldn't be selling out our future because of temporary jobs. That's just my opinion. I think we should be doing much better than what we're doing. And somebody just asked a question.
He asked about the power lines.
Yeah, the power lines are going to come down. It's a whole nother effort. They're not gonna be needed. The city spent like $20,000 on a power flow analysis to determine whether or not the lines could come down if the power plant wasn't there, and it came back with yes, unequivocally. It will be an easy revamp out at the LaFrasia substation to eliminate those
What happens to that
lines.
space there? All that space, the dog park and the wholesale nursery?
Right now, it's zoned for right-of-way, just Edison right-of-way, and so it will have to be rezoned, and that too will have to go for a vote. That's why we ought to be doing a comprehensive rezoning of the whole area instead of the piecemeal overdevelopment you're seeing. CFB passes, and then they do this over here, and then that'll be something else, and then they'll just try to build more homes down that. We ought to be looking at the whole thing as one piece.
This gentleman's been waiting for long.
Because I realize it's directly but indirectly related when those power lines do come down. I mean, right now we're talking about what is that development going to do on the sewers? What's that going to do on our infrastructure? I'm in construction, so stuff like I'm pretty hip to it. Those homes that go up 190th, those lots, they'll rezone that in a heartbeat. So those will become a couple $1 million view lots. And then the rest of those places, so now not only are you taking the development down there, now you're taking all the stuff that whether the power plant goes or not, they're going to develop all that way up 190th.
And, well, thank God we all voted Measure DD in. Measure DD is now Article 27 of our city charter, and for the city to upzone that to residential like that, we get to vote on it. So thank God we all voted for that. It still gives us a say on what goes in under there. But Bill is absolutely right. We shouldn't piecemeal this thing. We should take this as a once, not in a lifetime, a once ever opportunity for the power line area, the AES property, and the harbor to do something special with it. And to sit here and piecemeal it with a mall, 4-story condos, and God knows what going up the power lines is a travesty. We're squandering a one-time only opportunity to make our waterfront the crown jewel of Redondo. And I don't know about anybody here, but I don't find a mall and high-rise condos very inspiring or very visionary. I think we've got enough of that. We can do better than Measure B. Yes, sir.
What's the story with the California Coastal Commission? What do they have to do with any of this?
So the California Coastal Commission, if we pass this, the city then has to put it in front of the Coastal Commission. It's defined in Measure B, and then they get to weigh in on it. But if any of you were here during Measure G, we were hoping the Coastal Commission would throttle back the level of zoning in there, and all they did essentially was say, well, you got to put in a boat ramp, you got to put a sign for Moonstone Park, if any of you know where that is, and you got to protect the view from Zuliger Park. That's basically all the residents got out of it. So I have no trust or no faith that the Coastal Commission will do anything substantive to the zoning coming out. And I would bet you that AES is spending $850,000 on the election. They're already talking to the Coastal Commission staffers on how to sell this thing. Yes, sir, in the back.
Okay. I'm going to be practical here. Looks like there's tweaks required here. There's a bunch of people. I mean, I'm not going to go vote next week. But it's not going to be a high percentage. So, people like me, who've been here 20 years-ish, we want to get to that power plant. How are we going to convince those folks that this is not the deal that they think it is? Because people here, we have in mind, the people out there that aren't here, the ones that get the bid.
I hope there's some people who didn't make up their mind and have some valid questions, but the best thing we can do right now, we're not going to match $850,000 campaign. We don't have the money to put out a mailer every week. It's for people who attend these things to go out and talk to their neighbors and tell them how bad this is. And if they're no, make sure they get out their vote. Either help them file their mail-in ballot or volunteer to bring them down to the election center. I'm actually fairly impressed. You guys have been walking. I'm actually surprised that I think they've flooded most residents so much with some of this BS that it actually raised their suspicion. I mean, let me just go over one that I just got that really caught my eye. This is one signed by the mayor. This is what Measure B guarantees in writing, and then it goes down. It says, we'll have a place to go. Well, there's no guarantee that any of us will have a place to go. If they put in a barber shop down there and they call Walk Street a park, there's nothing for us down there. There's nothing in writing that guarantees us anything that we would go down there. will have the final say. Well, if you actually read section 13, you'll see that no, the developer has the final say. It says, with the consent of the developer. And then it starts, the property owner, which will be the developer in the future, or AES.
Who owns the property now?
AES,
Publicly traded company.
yes. So we won't have the final say. They have veto power over the city council, much less anything the residents would have to say there. He's saying it would guarantee that traffic won't clog our streets. Look through your whole sample ballot and look for traffic once in Measure B. It's not in there. It's not in there. So where he says guaranteed in writing, I have no clue. I would be embarrassed to put my name to a document like this. But the worst is, it says the developer will pay. It says the developer will pay for the needed infrastructure. They can't afford to widen PCH. Nobody can, the city can. So for him to say this as the mayor of Redondo, I would be embarrassed. It's disingenuous. He obviously, there's nothing in Measure B that requires the developer to pay for any public amenities. Look for it. It's not in there. There's no requirement for the developer to pay for anything for you and I. Let's see, what else? Oh, and then they put about the 20% land will be permanent open space. That one's fairly, that is written in there, but it doesn't say it's anything that we would use. But that's just one example of the mailers and how deceptive they are.
You had mentioned that 20% would be like open medians and stuff, theoretically. Is that true?
That's what, yes, that's
It
it.
would be like gutters? And
Read your ballot language. It says bioswales, which is a landscaped gutter, and it says road medians. Landscaped road medians can be counted
like
as
play
open
frisbee
space.
at the median?
Yeah.
You can't play at the beach anymore. You can't throw a frisbee at the beach.
But you can in a median. Yes, ma'am.
It's illegal.
If it's not passed and AES were to have to come back to the table, is there a feasible scenario where we could do something like Carlsbad is thinking, where there's 50% commercial, 50% parking, and have it still be somewhat profitable for AES?
Well, sure, and that's exactly, okay, the question was if Measure B passes, is there some, and correct me if I get this wrong, is there some path that we can take, similar to what Carlsbad is doing, that provides AES a good return on their money and brings something to the community that we don't have so much controversy with? And that's exactly what we're supposed to be doing. And what's thrown a wrench into the normal process is what AES is doing with Measure B. So, yeah, I mean, they're doing it right now in Carlsbad, and it's a great model. And, you know, if you vote down Measure B and you elect Candace Nafisi, wherever she is, to the city council, and you get people like her and me and apparently Steve Samarco's coming around, and I think Mayor Aspel and some other councilmen will kind of throw up their hands and go, wow, I guess we're going to have to talk to these people and come to the table and work with AES. And absolutely, I mean, the developers are getting a good return on their money.
I think that's a misconception out there, that people are saying, well, AES deserves to get a profit on their property. I don't know that everyone knows that there's a compromise.
Well, yeah, I mean, AES just wrote a zoning they think would maybe pass and make them a lot of money.
Yeah.
But, you know, and I don't blame them. I mean, you just want to make as much money as you can. Hey, look at this. We'll just write our own initiative and we'll all be rich. Go back to Virginia. But as a community, you have a responsibility to zone your land. These land use issues are huge, and you have a responsibility as a community to, you know, have a quality of life and not just let developers make up their own zoning and not have required open space, not have required traffic mitigations, and all the other impacts that are going to be brought forth. And you can, there's a balance. You can do it all. But this is exactly the wrong way to do it, frankly. Yes.
For those of us that don't have time to walk and talk to our neighbors, is there an email campaign that we can use to forward to people so we can get the word out before they leave?
Yeah, if people out there want to do something simple, you know, and not have just don't have a lot of time to spend, it's really word of mouth. It's huge.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, the question was, thank you. Is there something people can do if you can't walk the streets to get involved in an email campaign or something? It's not as big a time requirement to help with defeating Measure B. Is that close enough?
Can we email something?
Sure.
Do you have something prepared?
Right.
We have a 2-minute video on the R4 Facebook page, which actually goes through a lot of the reasons why people should vote no on it. It goes through a lot of details of the traffic, schools, everything that's involved with what we talked about tonight. That's a great way of forwarding that along.
And our
just say, take
flyers?
we have flyers as well too, So
And where do you find it on the internet?
it's in several places. One, it's on the R4 Facebook page.
How's that? How do you spell that? Access it? Just R4?
If you go to the search bar on Facebook, put R4 and that should show up.
It's on your flyer here.
It's also at the website www.knowonmeasureb.com. NRB.com.
If you get a flyer, those addresses are on the flyer.
Exactly. So that's a great way of sharing with your. It's a very hey folks, take a look at this. I want you to watch this video, this 2-minute video. This gentleman back there has been waiting for a while.
Yeah, thanks guys for showing up here tonight. Question, because you mentioned it earlier, what are the chances of other surrounding cities suing the city of Redondo for allowing this to happen?
Well,
and impacting their traffic as well?
I think there's a good chance Hermosa Beach is, well, I don't know, it's looking way down the road, but there's a good chance. I mean, Hermosa Beach sued Redondo before. It wouldn't surprise me if they sued him again. There could be some other public agency with serious concerns. Caltrans, for example, has stalled Legato project anyway. But yeah, there could be a variety of public agencies. This is the West Basin Municipal Water District. Where's the fresh water going to come from, right? With all these residences, we have serious water constraints already. I don't know when the West Basin is going to get religion and figure out that they can't just keep signing off all these EIRs for more people, and less water, less water. But eventually, I think they're going to. So there could be a variety of public agencies, just not just cities. But honestly, the only city I think, well, Manhattan could too, because it's going to affect Sepulveda a lot, adding traffic.
The people from one thing there, by the way, there's an Israeli-based operation known as Poseidon who is building the plant down in Carlsbad.
Yep. Right.
They're standing in line waiting for this to happen for a contract.
Oh yeah, and West Basin is kind of a moving target, but the last I heard is they're planning a desal plant down at the El Segundo power plant, where they actually do have a new power plant. So they want to site these desal plants next to big power sources because they use a lot of power, and it's one of the reasons that it's so expensive.
27 plants targeted for California.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go.
Make sure everybody, Nick?
You?
I got a beautiful mailer today, Recondo Beach. And I just want to compliment all the people that worked on that. It's absolutely beautiful. And what are your plans on getting that out? Have you been able to get it out to most of the people in Redondo, or how's that going to work?
Good question. The question was, he got a mailer today, and what are we planning on doing in terms of the campaign? Our strategy has been to maximize the dollars we have as best as we can. So we've been targeting several key districts with door hangers. I don't know if any of you got door hangers like these.
Do you buy those, or are they free, or?
No, we've been hanging them on folks' doors. This went out in the mail today, and this went to 5,000 households in Redondo Beach, and we have a final mailer that's going out to about 2,500 to 3,000 households. That'll arrive on people's mailboxes probably by Thursday, at the latest Friday. We have the campaign video. We had an ad in the Easy Reader newspaper last week, and we've been out there. It's kind of hard to compete with $850,000, but we've maximized your generous donations the best we can. So, thank you very much. And another thing that folks might want to consider is making your own signs, making your own banners if you want, letting people know in your neighborhood. What's very effective goes along the lines of what this woman had mentioned before, is writing your neighbors within a certain radius, whether it's on email or even hand-stamped and addressed envelopes, is incredibly effective in telling folks to be concerned about this, because that is what ends up winning elections. Media is great. It's great for reaching a lot of people, but in a town this small, people listen to their neighbors.
How many people vote in this town? What's the spread on the vote? If you influence 200 people, would that be significant?
Yeah, because
it could be very significant. Measure 8 lost by 249 votes. But as far as turnout goes, I'm predicting about a 30% turnout of registered voters, which really isn't very good when you consider the importance of this. There's about 40,000 registered voters in Redondo Beach.
10 to 12,000 voters.
Yeah, well, it's a big issue, so I'm guessing it'll be a 30%
We'll be with you.
voter turnout.
Gentleman back there?
Could you go a little more into the Carlsbad 50% commercial, 50% car, what that commercial's made up of?
Well, that's to be determined. They're going to have a hotel. Cities all love hotels because they get bed tax, which makes a lot of money. But they're looking at I talked to the assistant city manager just Friday, I guess, and they're looking at a mix of, retail, restaurants, hotels,
Don't you think
commercial.
that would have more commuters than residential that would have people living in their house as opposed to depending on customers?
Well, the nice thing about commercial is it doesn't usually generate rush hour traffic the way a residential development